Hello everyone, today's guest is Reed Hayes, a U.S. Green Beret who graduated from West Point in 2008 and served in the U.S. Army until 2017, serving 3 tours abroad, 1 in Afghanistan and 2 in Jordan. Reed tells us here about his experience throughout that journey as a soldier in training and in practice, and what it's like coming out the other side. Thank you all for tuning in. This is Ty, your host, and here we go with Reed Hayes. I think what I'm interested in hearing your take on is your experience growing up and wanting to serve the country from a military perspective, earning the ability to go to West Point, and then, as I understand it, earning your spot on an elite special forces section of the U.S. Army, and then going overseas in combat multiple times. And as much as you're willing to share about that experience, I would be curious just to hear, at this stage in your life, and you're 36, and you've been out of the Army for how
long? 4 years in August, I guess. Almost 4 years.
Yeah. So, just to hear whatever you want to say about it, just kind of for listeners to get a better understanding of what that means, because myself included, most people don't probably have any idea what that means, what you went through, starting at age 18, in terms of the level of commitment, and from a very young age, what was expected of you.
Yeah. So interesting. I don't know what the allure was for me, like to want to be in the military in the first place. Like, I don't remember any particular defining moment that was like, this is what I want to do. I just remember it was something I was always kind of drawn to. And then I guess the other thing that maybe what I think is going to be nice about this is there's probably a lot of stuff like that, like about this whole topic, that maybe our friends, like in Hingham that we grew up with, like, maybe I haven't really talked to anybody about any of this stuff besides Annie. So maybe I'll give them just a little better insight. Not that they've never really expressed any desire, but there's always kind of that weird, like, do I ask people about this stuff, or do I ask like a childhood friend about it? So I don't know. Maybe this is just maybe a better understanding why my life has been so much different than a majority of theirs. But anyways, like growing up, I don't remember exactly like any defining thing that made me want to do it. But I do remember when I was like 12 or 13, I think I must have been like 13, our good friend Matt Kiernan's older brother Patrick got into West Point. And at the same time, my brother's good friend from when we lived in New Jersey also got into West Point. They were classmates together. But I'd never heard of it. But I was at Matt Kiernan's house, and they had sent home like a VHS tape, like what to expect when you go to West Point. And so like we watched it at Matt Kiernan's house. And it was like, men and women in camouflage, like kind of, running around shooting guns, like crawling in the dirt, and flying in helicopters. And I was just like that looks really cool. It was very interesting to me. So I kind of had my sights set on that. Just thought it would just be really interesting thing to do, and it just spoke to me. And then, like, fast forward, a couple years. I had a couple, and I don't remember the exact teachers or whoever it was, but I remember like declaring my desire to want to go to West Point to a couple key developmental figures in my life, teachers. Again, I don't remember exactly who, and then being like, nah, like, Reed, you don't have the grades for it, you don't have X, Y, or Z for it. And just kind of being like, all right, well, fuck you, watch me.
Prove them wrong.
Prove them wrong. And maybe now looking back on it as a 36-year-old, maybe I should have been a little more thoughtful about my choices, about why I want to do something instead of just wanting to prove somebody wrong.
Right.
But that was definitely a motivating factor. And then the other big thing was like, 9/11 when I was 16, about to be 17.
Yeah.
watching that happen. And again, I had already had a strong desire to want to go to West Point before then, but that just kind of solidified that for me. You know, I remember in October watching the videos on the news of like the Green Berets, you know, on horseback in Afghanistan, you know, Rangers jumping onto Objective Rhino and doing all these things, just being like, man, that would be fucking cool to be tip of the spear, like one of those guys doing that job, you know, to be best of the best, to go do these things.
Yep.
It just kind of sharpened my focus. But so I remember I went to Hingham High School for 2 years, had a lot of fun with all of our friends, was not getting the grades that I needed or I was capable of. So my parents kind of strongly encouraged, not forced, but said, you know, you should go to BC High if you want to do this. Ended up switching over to BC High and just really kind of buckled down my 2 years there and worked really hard and got really good grades. Applied to West Point as a senior, but didn't get in off the bat.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was helpful for me is the admissions director at the time for New England was this guy named Captain Mike Palazza, who was from Stoughton, and he was a hockey player at West Point, and he was a typical masshole. And I've been calling this guy every like 2 weeks for 2 or 3 years to tell him about the things I've been up to and how to make my application stronger. And he told me on the phone, he was like, hey Reed, like, you're not going to get into West Point this year. Sorry, just we had a really strong applicant pool and you're just not quite up to mustard. And I think my words to him on the phone was like, okay, great, like when can I apply for next year's class?
Yeah.
Because I was going to go to VMI for a year, the Virginia Military Institute, for a year. And I'd been accepted there. And then he hung up he said, I'll call you back. He hangs up on the phone. He calls me back like an hour later, maybe it was a day later. And he said, hey, I've got this prep school thing, so you can go to Valley Forge Military College for a year. Spend a year there, don't screw up, stay out of trouble, and then you'll pretty much guaranteed admission into the following year's class at West Point. So you show up at West Point like end of May, beginning of June. I think I showed up there May 28th. It's like the couple days after Memorial Day. And you have like your basic training program called Beast Barracks. And I remember like I'd already spent a year at Valley Forge and I was so excited that I got to West Point. But like my parents were about to drop me off and I remember like having like this like, moment of reflection in my head, like kind of like a panic, like what am I doing? Like, is this really what I want to do? Like, you know, and the first day you're there, it's crazy. Like there's people yelling at you, they're and I had the background of having spent the year at a military college, so I knew a lot of like the basics, but 95% of my classmates at West Point had no previous military experience. So like there's all this yelling, people are screwing these things up because they're trying to get it right, and you show up in the morning and then that night at 5 p.m. that night you do like a full-on parade where you do your oath. So they're getting you in process, you're filling all this paperwork, you're doing like a physical, you're getting uniforms, they're shaving your head, they're teaching you how to march. So it's this big long day, and it's nonstop from the moment you say goodbye to your parents. I mean, they tell you like, hey, you've got 60 seconds to say goodbye to your mom and dad, and then that's it. See you later.
Wow.
And then so you have like the cadet oath is the parade you do at the end of the day, and I remember, you know, we go out there and you're marching out, and I think I saw my parents, and I remember being like, man, I could just like walk right over to them right now and be done.
Yeah.
And I thought about that a lot, like that very first day there, because I was kind of like, man, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, all my friends from home, from Hingham, have been like, finished their first year of college or the peak year, and they have a blast. And like, you know, I'd already missed so much with those guys. I was kind of like, what am I doing this for? Am I doing this because I wanted to do it, or am I doing this just because it's kind of like, I always wanted to prove people wrong. But, you know, I just kind of swallowed it and just drove on. So yeah, then like the first 7 weeks of West Point Beast Barracks Cadet Basic Training it's just like piddly shit. They're teaching you how to be like a soldier. They're kind of breaking you down from who you were into what you kind of need to be a part of the the big machines. So you're learning how to dress, you're learning how to make your bed, how to eat, how to pack your stuff in your rucksack, which is what they call backpacks. So you kind of have this whole transformation from civilian to soldier that first summer there, which is hard. But the funny thing is like there's a few amount of upperclassmen because the majority of the sophomores, juniors, and seniors are out doing other training, elsewhere in the United States at different Army bases, different Army units. So you outnumber the upperclassmen during the summer. There's 9 of you new cadets, and there's like 1 or 2 upperclassmen per. So you feel kind of like you've accomplished something at the end of the summer, and then there's another parade, you get accepted into the Corps of Cadets, but you go from being a new cadet to a plebe.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, for every one of you, there's 3 upperclassmen, and you've got to know all these like stupid trivia.
Yeah.
And it's not stupid. I mean, there's a purpose to it, but it seems inane at the time.
Yeah.
And then you're dealing with that. You're dealing with being a 4th class citizen for a year until basically graduation 7 months later.
What does that entail for being a plebe? What does it entail in comparison to upperclassmen?
So it's little stuff like you're not allowed to talk when you're outside of your room. Everywhere you walk, you've got to have your hands, balled up in fists. If you see any upperclassmen, you've got to say, whoever the football team is you're playing that weekend.
Yeah.
You see the upperclassmen, you address them by rank. So, let's say we're playing Tulane. I see a sophomore, which we call yucks. You see a yuck and you say, beat Tulane, corporal. If you see a junior, which is a cadet sergeant, beat Tulane, sergeant. Then when you go to meals and stuff like that, they have, what's Schofield's definition of discipline, and you've got to know all these things,
Yeah.
How many gallons are in Lusk reservoirs, 78 million gallons when the water's flowing over the spillway, stuff like that. Like just random trivia. That's part tradition, but also that they want you to have this attention to detail because that's required of you. That's what you don't know this yet, but going forward, that's the kind of stuff you're going to expect of kind of your junior soldiers.
Attention to detail and understanding of rank so that when real decisions have to be made, there's no question, there's no confusion.
Yeah, exactly. And it's teaching you how to follow, how to be a follower, how to be a subordinate.
Yeah. Because
you're going to be expected to lead. So you've got to understand what it's like to be the low person on the totem pole.
Yeah.
And to be kind of shit on and told what to do. And as a plebe, your only responsibility is showing up at the right place at the right time in the right uniform with the right attitude.
Yeah.
But other than that, you're only in charge of yourself.
Yeah.
And then as you progress through the years as a cadet, when you're a sophomore, aka yearling, aka yuck, you have 1 or 2 freshmen you're mentor and you're in charge of. So it's like, hey, why is your plebe's shoes not signed? Oh shit, that's your responsibility because if that guy screwed up, it reflects, you're in charge of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of a whirlwind. So I finished my first year there. Showed up again May 28th of 2004. I don't think I got home till I think I had 1 weekend off in the fall of 2004, another one in the spring of 2005. Then got to go home for 2 weeks in June of 2005, and then I was right back to West Point for the remainder, from June 15th until August. So that was kind of the longest break I had in my all 4 years I was there.
Yeah.
Went back sophomore year, did that. When I was a sophomore, I tried out for a couple of the programs that the school used to offer for people who were interested in going special operations. So I tried out to go to the Special Forces Combat Diver course. Got selected for that. Got selected to try out for the Special Forces course. Kind of the way the Army was at the time, they ended up changing a bunch of stuff, so no cadets were allowed to go to that. But instead, the next summer, I went to, let's see what I do. I went out to Fort Lewis in Seattle, Washington. I spent a month with there's a Special Forces group out there, so I got to spend a month kind of seeing what it's like to be a Green Beret and kind of spending time with the team to see how they operate.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. I mean, it really kind of focused my desire to want to do that.
Yeah.
And then I actually went to the British Military Academy for a month at Sandhurst. Spent a month with those guys, which was a lot of fun too.
Where's that?
It's in England. So it's Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. I think it's near Surrey.
I didn't know that you did that.
Yeah. The claim to fame was I was there. So they work in they have 3 classes come in per year, and I was in the class that was about to graduate. I trained with them, and that was the class ahead of whoever the older brother is, not the one who's in California now, Prince.
Oh.
Who's the senior royal? William.
Maybe.
Charles.
Prince Harry is the one who bailed.
Yeah, So when I was there, Harry and his dad, Charles, that's what I'm thinking of, they came back for a polo tournament. Because the older brother, who was actually a year behind, or a couple years behind Harry, in terms of Sandhurst, was a cadet there at the time, or an officer cadet, as they called him. So that was really cool. And then, golly.
If you were to be, what would you say you learned at West Point? What are the main things you learned in retrospect? If you were put on the spot, what stands out about your time while you were there, other than how it sounds like it was an abrupt change? There's a little bit of second guessing on day one.
Yeah.
And then you just sort of leaned into the experience and made the most of it and committed to your commitment that you had made. But what stands out about what it taught you, or what were they trying to get across?
I think now I look at I think what made me successful, able to kind of get through that whole thing, was just that you just kind of swallow it and just keep going.
Yeah.
There's a lot of piddly stupid bullshit that happens there, and it's all got a purpose, but it I kind of just all right, good deal, yes, and nod my head, keep going. Don't fight a battle that's not worth fighting. Just kind of swallow your feelings, or swallow how you feel about something, because you can't really change it. And it's going to do is it's going to make things more difficult for you if you raise a stink about it. I guess I basically understood how to pick my battles.
Yeah.
And kind of suppressed a lot of my the way I felt about a lot of things. Didn't have a whole range of emotions there.
Yeah.
It's just all right, this is what's got to get done.
Yeah. So you just put your head down, and you were convinced on wanting to be in the Army in some capacity.
Yeah.
And so you chose to do it, and then you had a chip in your shoulder, I'm gonna do this. People don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
And that's gonna get me through this.
Yeah.
But it's still 4 years of using that as your motivation. But I guess the further you go, I guess you get a little bit more closer to the finish line, and you probably create relationships, and you're learning a lot. it's a great school. Educationally, you're probably learning a lot too.
Yeah. It's and I'm biased, of course, but I think it's pretty reasonable to believe that it's on par with an Ivy League education.
Yeah.
In so many ways, it's free, which is also a huge benefit. You've got a job, you've got great experiences that are going to come to you. But yeah, it's the way I looked at it, and I'm kind of reflecting on it now. I'm kind of regretful, because my whole thing was just keep your head down and keep going.
Yeah.
I didn't spend a lot of time picking my head up and looking around and being hey, this is actually kind of a pretty place. I think I went to New York City 3 or 4 times. The whole time I was there, I was 40 minutes north of the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all these experiences, I was more focused on just getting my head down and getting through it than experiencing it.
Yeah.
But at the time, that's just all I wanted to do, is I wanted to get through that place and get out of there and graduate and get out to the Army and be on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, the idea, while I was there, I was always excited about being in the Army, and this is, of course, I showed up in 2004. This is when kind of Iraq was, Afghanistan at the time was done. Iraq was the insurgency in Iraq was just starting to pick up. So things were definitely getting very interesting in that respect. You know, one of the things that happens at West Point, when a West Point grad dies, they'll announce their name at the mess hall during lunch. So, you know, you get in there for lunchtime, and you're standing behind your seat. You don't sit down. You stand behind your seat, and then they say attention to orders, and everyone kind of, puts their heels together and stands up, and they'll read whatever the announcements are for the day, and they'll also say, moment of silence for, let's say, Captain so-and-so, West Point class of 2001, killed in action, Baghdad, or, or whatever. So I think, really, it wasn't even that bad fall 2004, but 2005, I remember 2005, it just it started happening a lot. A lot of guys getting killed, and then obviously, Iraq just got kind of crazy. So there was sort of a singular focus on that, and a lot of our instructors were coming back to West Point from being out in the Army, and they all had combat experience either in Afghanistan or Iraq, and it was very much these conflicts aren't going away. So hey, this isn't West Point, and I'm speaking as if I was one of those captains or majors coming back to West Point in 2005. Hey, this isn't the West Point I graduated in. This is real deal.
Right.
You are going to be leading soldiers in combat. Your decisions are going to be the difference between whether or not people live or die. So you need to take this very seriously. So that was kind of the way that also helped change my view. Again, I probably could have tried more academically. I know I could have and had better grades, but I knew, hey, I can be very physically fit and I can be very good at the military stuff, and I think those things will take me further in the Army when I graduate from here. So there was kind of that focus, and I was excited to get out, and everyone talks about you want to get out there, and everybody who's in the Army who has not been in combat or has not been in a combat situation, they want that experience because they want to prove it.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be the one in the group who doesn't have that experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, and I think for a majority of the people I was at West Point with, it's hey, this is what we're here to do. We're here to lead soldiers in combat and whatever our function is in the Army. And we just want to get out of this place. We want to get out of West Point so we can go do our jobs, and we can, see the elephant or whatever they say in the book, see combat and have that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So that you sense that amongst your colleagues at West Point too, the same kind of eagerness to just get to it, to get.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because I guess why else would you go? Why else would you go to West Point?
And there were guys in my class who had been in the Army beforehand. A couple of guys, some of my good friends who had been in the invasion of Iraq or had been involved in Afghanistan in one way or another, and they had what's called a combat infantry badge, which at the time was the only thing that kind of signified that somebody had been in a gun battle with the enemy. So those guys walked around campus like freaking gods. I was oh shit, they've been there, they've done that.
Yeah.
So there was definitely some kudos, for those people, and it's just everyone's. The Army is in my opinion, a big kind of measuring contest in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And you want to have the same. You want to be on the same level as those people who have been there before. And you don't want to go in as left out.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe the idea is you don't want to be the liability or the weakling.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So a lot of not peer pressure as much as just team dynamics really. So you went to West Point, and then you realized while you were in West Point that you wanted to be a ranger. Yeah. And what does that mean? What does that even mean to be? What is special forces? What is a ranger? Yeah. Let's cover the basics.
Yeah. So the way the Army works, so there's coming out of West Point, you commission as an officer, as a second lieutenant. So if you want to be a ranger or a ranger qualified, a guaranteed slot, a guaranteed chance at going to ranger school is if you commission as an infantry officer, which is kind of, infantry is missions to close with and destroy the enemy. like you are for all intents, you're the fighting element of the Army.
Yeah.
So, and then Ranger School it's like one of those things, again, I talk about the Army that people like compare themselves, but like, graduating Ranger School and being able to wear a Ranger tab, on your left shoulder, that's just like, it's again, one of those things that sets you apart.
Yeah.
Like, so as an infantry officer, if you didn't have a Ranger tab, it was like, what's this guy's problem? I mean, it would not ruin your career, but it'd be very, very hard for you to succeed like long term in the Army without it. So I wanted to go to Ranger School. I wanted to be an infantry officer because I wanted to lead, soldiers in combat. So after I graduated, I commissioned as an infantry officer, and I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. Went to the infantry officer basic course, which is just teaching you kind of the tactics of being an infantry officer, how to lead a 40-man rifle or 39-man rifle platoon, tactically, and then also kind of the administrative piece of it. And then I started Ranger School on January 3rd of 2009. And Ranger School is just like if you're lucky enough to get straight through it, it's broken out into 3 phases. Each is about 3 weeks long. You start off at Fort Benning, then you go to the mountains of northern Georgia, and then you go down and spend 3 weeks in the swamps in Florida. And it's just, basically 2 straight months of almost no sleep, almost no food, and just walking and carrying everything in your life on your back.
Gosh.
So like me, I was lucky I got straight through, but I lost like 35 pounds. There's all kinds of books and stories out there. I didn't have any really bad hallucinations when I was in Ranger School, but it's just freaking miserable.
So is that similar to the buds of Navy SEALs?
Yeah.
I like your face.
Yeah.
Is it the same, like, not in terms of, necessarily in terms of like comparing the challenge as much as comparing like the ranks in that section of the military? Is it like that?
It's sort of, but like, I would say Buds is probably harder in some aspects than Ranger School because it's just a smaller program. It's much more selective. Like Ranger School, you start with a class of 300 odd people, and by the end you graduate 25%.
Yeah.
I mean the misery and the starvation and the being cold and wet is I guess there's other 2 differences, like, and I haven't been through Buds, but from what I understand from the guys I know who've been through that's just more an exercise of like, at the end of the day, a guy's not going to quit. They're basically pushing you to the absolute limit to make sure you're not going to quit.
Yeah. In Buds.
Yeah. And Ranger School is, I believe, very much the same way, but the big difference at Ranger School is that, hey, you guys haven't slept in 2 days. You've eaten like 1,000 calories in the past 24, 48 hours. But you've got to plan this mission. You've got to move your guys across a couple miles of terrain, up and down these hills. You've got to set up an ambush. You've got to conduct that ambush. You've got to maintain command and control of your soldiers as you're doing it. And you've got to be off of the target, off of the ambush, and do it and be gone in 3 minutes or whatever the time standard is. So there's a big leadership element to Ranger School that I don't think is as much emphasized like during Hell Week at Buzz.
I see.
So the big challenge for Ranger School is that, like, I'm freaking tired and I'm hungry, but this is my patrol. I'm the guy in charge.
Yeah.
And I've got to get these other 38 dudes like motivated. I got to get them moving. I got to get them online. I got to keep them awake, which is freaking damn near impossible. And guys haven't slept in a couple of days.
Yeah.
And there's a leadership component to it. That
So once you get through that, then you're a Ranger, and that allows you to eventually be a leader of men in combat, men and women in combat.
Yeah.
Without that, you can't be a leader?
No, you can.
Yeah.
So I graduated Ranger School, and then I went to the 101st Airborne Division, which was my first duty assignment. And so this is how it kind of works out. So as a Ranger qualified lieutenant, so I had a Ranger tab, you know, like I passed the test.
Yeah.
I went straight to a platoon. Like I showed up and they gave me a platoon the next day. Whereas in my battalion there was, let's say 15 other lieutenants. The guy who didn't have a Ranger tab, let's see, he was only a platoon leader for like 4 months, and as soon as somebody showed up with a Ranger tab, they kicked him out.
I see. Kicked him out of leadership or kicked him out?
Out of leadership. Then they put him in a kind of a staff, kind of headquarters position.
I see.
You know, right, wrong, or indifferent, looking back on it now, I don't necessarily think it's the best way to do things, but in the way that that culture is, like, the Ranger tab is your litmus test. Like, you must have that to prove your worth when you show up to platoon. Because as a young lieutenant, like, especially at the time, showing up in 2009, you know, most of the guys in your platoon have been to combat, have been deployed. Yeah. So you're this brand new guy, and the one piece of credibility you have is that Ranger tab. Yeah. So it's like, if you don't have that, then you're just some new dude out of school who happened to go to college and is an officer. Yeah. So you graduated West Point, you got your Ranger tab, you passed Ranger school, and then you went overseas right away? So no, I showed up to the 101st in the spring of 2009, got my platoon right away, and then didn't deploy to Afghanistan until May of 2010. So I've been there almost a year when we deployed. Okay. And then we were, I don't know if it was part of President Obama's surge. I think we had somehow been shifted around, because originally we were supposed to go to the southern part of Afghanistan to an area around Kandahar called the Arghandab River Valley. But I think as part of the surge, we were tasked or moved up to a place called Kunar province, which is in the eastern part of Afghanistan, like right on the border of Pakistan. So that's where I ended up going. So left, I think May 5th or May 10th of 2010. You know, took a long plane ride, and then got to Afghanistan a few days later, and then, you know, it was kind of game on for the next year. Gosh. Yeah. What was that like? Like, what were your thoughts? What was it like? I mean, it's so hard to imagine going into that life, going in away from here and into a situation where, you know, your entire understanding of existence must flip on its head, in the sense that you could be shot at or blown up or at any point, and now you're also responsible for other people's lives all of a sudden. I mean, I guess it's not all of a sudden, because that's what you'd been training for and like visualizing for so long. Yeah. But still, I guess I'm just projecting my own confoundedness with the premise of all, like, going on a plane and just showing up there and saying, all right, now it's time. Yes, definitely. I mean, like, it's what you train for you know, since the day you show up to West Point. This is what's kind of been drilled into your head. You've read the books, and but there's definitely, like, you know, that kind of like thing, like, oh, this is for real. Like, I remember saying goodbye to Annie in the parking lot and just being like, fuck, like, I'm about to be gone for a year. Yeah. You know, and then, you know, kind of that old training, you know, just put my head down and get through it. Yeah. Kind of kicked in. But yeah, then you get on this plane and you're, you know, flying for freaking ever, and you stop in Kyrgyzstan. I think it was Kyrgyzstan. And then you get to Afghanistan, and we stopped at Bagram first, and you get off the plane, and I mean, it's beautiful. Like, you look around, there's these gorgeous mountains all around you, and you're like, man, like, this is a gorgeous place. But you're on this huge military base. Yeah. And then I think that night, you know, there was a big attack, and the base got boarded a little bit. I mean, but it's so big and sprawling that it wasn't even near where we were. But you hear all these noises, you're like, oh, I guess, like, that's what it sounds like. Yeah. And then, you think about, like, I don't necessarily know if, like, you ever have that idea that, like, I hope I'm not going to let anyone down, you know, like, and of course you never imagine, like, being in a bad situation. You just kind of, like, think, like, like, this is what it's going to be like, you know. Yeah. It's But yeah, there's parts of it where you're kind of like, you want to get to it. Like, you want to get out there. You want to get to where your last stop is, and you want to, like, get out there on missions. You want to find the bad guys. You want to kill them, like, because that's what you're supposed to do. That's the training.
Yeah.
But it's and maybe it's just a factor of my age at the time, but like, I didn't spend a lot of time like really thinking about the momentous and the weight of the decisions or what I was about to take part in.
Yeah.
You never really think about like the worst outcome or the worst day.
Right.
And even like, I remember I think I got there, like, we get to our little fire base, our combat outpost, as we call it, Penich. And, the unit that was leaving, they were still patrolling a couple days. So like the first day I was walking out of the front gate with them to kind of go do like a little local patrol just to kind of see the area. And it's like, you're loading your gun, your rifle, and pulling the bolt back, and you're loading a live rounds in there, and you've got grenades, and you've got 200 rounds of ammunition on your body, and I remember thinking like, all right, like, game on.
Yeah.
You're sort of switched on, but you're not really.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really know. You kind of like, okay, like, I think this is how I'm gonna react. But then it was like 4 or 5 days later, I think it was May 19th or May 17th, was like the first day I ever got shot at. And I remember we were getting shot at, and I was kind of like, what's going on? Like, you don't even, like, it's so hard to understand, what is actually happening. And the guys who had been there, the unit they were replacing, we were still with some of those guys. They're running around like crazy, and I'm kind of looking around like what the hell's going on? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, like, we're getting shot at. Like, okay, fuck, like, what do we do now? You kind of, it's not like you freeze up first, but it's like it takes a minute for like the computer to boot up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, like, I better get behind something. Like, I better figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's a very surreal experience when that happens the first time, because it's something you've been thinking about and training for, and it's also nothing at all like I'd say all the firefights and all the gunfights I got into Afghanistan, there's only like one time where I actually like saw the guys who were shooting at me.
Wow.
Most of the time it was like so far away, and I was, I guess, also being in charge, you're trying to do other things, like you're on the radio, but it takes a hot minute for the computer to boot up, and then you're like, oh shit, okay, what am I supposed to do now? Like, look around, is everyone okay? Yep, everyone's okay. Okay, I need to let the higher, I gotta let my company commander know, hey, we're getting shot at, everything's okay, but can we get the artillery pointed this way or something like that? It's just all these things run through your head, and there's a lot of management to do. And that first time, it just takes a long time for those processes to kind
that
of
is
come
unbelievable to imagine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a good scenario to use as an example of what that reality actually means. Because it's thinking, there's soldiers, they're in the army, they're overseas, and they're in a dangerous position.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when you get shot at, you can't see where it's coming from.
Yep.
You're a human, so you think, okay, how do I handle this and not panic? That's what the training is for. But it's still nerve-wracking whether you like it or not to be getting shot at.
Yeah.
Not to mention when you are responsible for other people. So when you're on a mission, and that happens, you say, is everyone okay? Call the commander, let them know you're getting hit at, or shot at. Can we get the artillery pointed? And then that person makes a decision about how to react to the information he's getting from you. Yeah. But he's hearing it from other people too, I imagine.
That's part of it. And the other thing was, like, when I was there was very like restrictive rules of engagement, because they're working, we always work very hard to make sure like that innocent people aren't,
Right.
fired on like that. The enemy knows that, so they're going to do the best they can. They're going to shoot from houses they know are full of people because we can't really shoot back that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you explain to higher headquarters, you say, hey, I'm getting shot at from, on a military grid map, it's broken down into grid squares. You approximate where the enemy's at. Hey, he is at this position. I want you to fire artillery at this point. So you explain the situation, and it's kind of laughable. But by the way it worked out was the enemy was smart enough to know that it would take 10 minutes for us to explain the situation to our higher headquarters, and for higher headquarters to go through to look at the map to make sure that there was no civilians in the area, which they could have never told.
Yeah.
But the threat of potential civilian casualties was enough for them to go through kind of all these checks to make sure that that wasn't a possibility before they even fired artillery.
Yeah.
And then what they would really do is they would fire what's called a pre-planned target. So like, if I wanted to shoot at position 1, 2, 3, 4, where the bad guys were at, the bad guys knew that there was a house there or houses there that we couldn't shoot into. So we would have to shoot at target 5, 6, 7, 8, which was a good distance away. It would be completely ineffective. But because that target was known and there was no civilians in the area, that's where the target would be shot at. So they would shoot artillery into basically these empty grid squares, and there'd be no effects on the enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be enough to be loud enough and that the enemy would kind of, at that point, they'd already be gone. If they were still in the area, they'd be like, all right,
Yeah.
let's go another day.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's exceptionally frustrating.
And frustrating because it's not ineffective.
Yeah, it's completely ineffective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you get back. So like, as an officer, you get back after being out there and being in like a firefight, a gunfight, and you have to submit a report, like kind of what happened. Hey, we got shot at. We were here. The enemy was here. We called artillery. And it was shot at this location. But then you'd read the report that was sent to the higher headquarters. The couple levels up, and it'd be like estimated 3 to 5 enemy killed in action. And you'd sit there and you'd read that as a lieutenant, like there's fucking nobody. No, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But they have to justify shooting artillery.
Wow.
So it's like that stuff is freaking baffling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes you wonder how many other things like that out there are. So when and then at the end of the day, you're like, all right, let's just go home, go to bed, or like, when do you know? I imagine it's case by case, but like, when do you know when it's time to call it a day or call it a mission?
It's pretty much like whatever you set out to do that day. So if it was go to Village X and talk to, Billy, the chief elder.
Yeah.
Once you, depending on what happens on the way there, like either you get there and you talk to Billy and things are cool and you go home because that was your mission for the day, or you got stopped halfway there because you got into a gunfight.
Yeah.
And then at that point you call up and say, hey, do you want us to keep going to talk to Billy, or do you want us to head back?
Yeah. And then you're checking in along the way with someone.
Yeah, you're always in touch. Yeah. You're always.
You're like, hey, I'm going to meet with Billy, and we made it. We talked to him, and here's what he told me.
Before you even leave the gate, you tell your commander, hey, this is where we're going today. This is how many guys we're bringing. This is how many trucks we're bringing. This is what we're going to do. If we get in a firefight on the way, this is what we're going to do. I mean, you plan for all these different scenarios so that everyone kind of knows, and you brief it to your guys. They know, like, if this happens, we're going to do this, or this happens, we're going to do that.
So you plan the night before, or the morning of, or what?
Yeah, you plan the night before, a couple days before. And depending on the level of mission, how many people are involved. So if it was a bigger mission with, 100 dudes, that's a much more deliberate operation. So that's maybe when you have a helicopter drop you off and there's artillery's already ready to go at these targets and whatnot.
And then, so how many stints did you do overseas?
Total, I did 3.
Three full years separated?
No, I did. So when I was a regular infantry guy, I spent that year in Kunar province, Afghanistan. And then fast forward a couple years after I went through the Special Forces course, I did 2 deployments to Jordan. So the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, just right there in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So and those were both, the first one was like 4.5, almost 5 months. The second one was about 4 months.
Do you know how long they're going to be before you leave? Or are they just like, hey, you can go home now?
Yeah, know, like when you're in the regular army, you know you're going to be gone for a year. I mean, they can always extend that.
Sure.
They can always, I mean, very rarely does the army like send you home early. So usually it's just, they'd send you longer. And then I went out with Jordan, had a general idea of how long I was going to be there, but things change.
Yeah. And what surprised you about it, or what was different about the reality than what you had thought it was going to be like all along?
I think the big thing that kind of surprised me, and one thing I've thought a lot about, and I talked to Amy about, is like, you have this idea, and that's funny, this is a couple of days after D-Day, and I think about these guys a lot, and it's the same exact thought process. Is like, a lot of guys were on those boats, motoring towards shore, and they're looking around at everyone else in their boats, and just feeling like, I feel bad for these poor bastards who are all going to die.
Yeah.
Like, you never ever have the perception that anything, like, I mean, I knew guys, plenty of guys who got killed, buddies of mine and stuff like that, and it's like, you never think it's going to be you.
Yeah.
And having like crazy close calls. I mean, like branches getting shot off like right next to you, like, feeling a machine gun like following you as you're trying to run away from it.
Yeah.
It's still, you have this mentality. I don't know if it's a defense mechanism your brain just has naturally, but you never ever think it's going to be you.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just how you keep going.
Yeah.
For some things. But then, like, as I've gotten older, I thought more and more about, again, just guys I knew who got killed. And, you think about them, and it's like, again, if you thought you were going to die, you wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, good point.
If you're reasonably, you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So, like, all those guys, just, again, looking around, be like, man, I feel bad for you and your wife and kids or whatever like that.
Right.
You're looking at the next guy, you never think it's going to be you. So that's the biggest difference, I think. And for me, it took a long time to kind of think about that. And
to think about that it could be you.
There's no reason why.
Right.
I mean, there's zero reason why it couldn't
right.
be me. And then, like, again, I did dumb things, there's things that I just plain dumb luck.
Yeah.
That's all, like, so I think that's the biggest difference in what your expectation is and what the reality of it is. But you don't think about that until years later.
Yeah. Yeah, so even while you're in it, you weren't thinking that?
No.
Oh, yeah, wow.
No, I think the closest, I mean, I had a really, really close call one day, one round went straight by my head, and it was so loud and so close that I thought one of my guys, or it wasn't one of my guys, it was a friend of mine, I was at a different job at the time, I thought he was shooting out at somebody, but then I looked at his rifle and I realized he hadn't shot at all. And then second round came by, and I feel like I've convinced myself more of the way this one story is over the years, but maybe it's not. Maybe this is how it truly was. But it almost felt like I could feel the heat of this bullet pass next to my head, and because it was the second round, like, then I just realized that somebody was like shooting directly at me at this particular time, and I dropped to the ground, and this dude I used to bring with me, he thought I got shot in the face, and then he said he was blown away, surprised when I got up, and I took off running to like this little berm.
Yeah.
And I left him, and he had like this mortar too, which is pretty heavy, and some mortar rounds, and he was there by himself for a second, but I was like trying to get the fuck out of Dodge.
Yeah.
But that night I got back to the base, and we kind of did our reporting afterwards, and I slept for like 14 hours. Like, I had this like massive adrenaline dump, whatever, and I think and I remember just kind of being like, getting back and just being like, holy shit, and there was other times it was like really close, like some freak stuff that like blew up near me, and like me, actually the same guy, I remember that we had something blow up, from here to the TV, which is like 20 feet away, and I remember we like both looked at each other and we were like, I'm okay, like, are you okay? And we're like, I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, when the round went past my head, and I swear I could feel the heat off of it, like I remember that night being like, that was really fucking close.
Yeah.
And I slept for like 14 hours, and I didn't intend to sleep for 14 hours. My body just I don't know, went into like recovery or comfort, whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And that's the reality you're in every day, in theory, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not like, there's a, like, it's not like you're shooting and gunning and doing that stuff every single day, but,
yeah.
Where we were at, it was fortunate because most of our engagements were like actual people shooting at us, as opposed to like IEDs, like, explosives in the ground everywhere, which is the reality for a lot of other guys in different parts of Afghanistan, which is, I think, even more terrifying. But you'd have a week or two or something where nothing would happen.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you'd have a day where it was just like things went fucking bananas.
Yeah. But you didn't really know when to expect that.
No.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
You absolutely never know. I mean, things are normal, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, game on.
Yeah.
You're getting shot at.
Yeah.
So yeah, you never have
Yeah.
any idea when to expect it.
And you mentioned a second ago that you went to Special Forces school in between deployments. What is that?
So I came back from my first deployment in the 101st, and at the time in the Army, just because the way the Army was trying to grow, all of us who graduated in 2008 were made captain in 3 years. So I was a captain in 2011, June of 2011, and I'd always wanted to be a Green Beret. I had, again, watched Afghanistan happen and thought it would be really cool. So I went and tried out for Special Forces, made it through the Special Forces Assessment and Selection, which is the you got to pass that to even get an entrance into the training course. And then I spent about 18 months in the Special Forces Qualification course, which is broken down into, small unit tactics, survival, escape, resistance, and evasion school, how to be like a Special Forces officer in my case, which is 14 weeks long, and all the guys have different specialties. The final collective exercise called Robin Sage, which is a month long. And then you spend 6 months in language school, learning a second language, which is the bedrock of what makes Green Berets different than anybody else.
I see.
Different than SEALs. The SEALs do a little bit of language, but it's an integral part of what makes Green Berets. Green Berets is our language capability.
And Green Beret equals you've completed Special Forces in the Army.
So when you graduate from the course, you're technically become a Special Forces officer.
Yeah.
And you get this. You wear the Special Forces tab on your shoulder, but the headgear, the hat is the Green Beret.
I see.
So the colloquial name is Green Beret, but the true proper name is Special Forces.
Okay.
So
and then once you have that, then what does that allow you to do that you couldn't do before?
So it puts you in a much smaller, specialized unit. So you go from, as an infantry guy, you're in charge of a 39-man rifle platoon, which is made up of, mostly 19 and 20-year-old kids who are, your lower enlisted private first class specialists. A few kind of older guys who've had a few years in the Army. Whereas Special Forces is a 12-man team. Mm-hmm. And most of the guys there are, have a little bit more maturity. Most of them generally have some time in the Army. They're 25 to 40 years old, some life experience, a lot of maturity. Have met a lot of, physically fit, mature, so you graduate the Special Forces course. I was assigned to 5th Special Forces Group here at Fort Campbell. So I came back here in 2014, and then I went to the Special Forces Underwater Operations School, which is, again, colloquially known as dive school.
Yep.
And so we do underwater infiltration. So you learn how to just do basic scuba diving, and then you kind of progress onto what's called closed circuit diving, which is a system that it's like a scuba tank but doesn't give off any bubbles.
I see.
So you breathe and your air gets recycled and
wow.
It goes through a tank with lime in it that scrubs out, that pulls the carbon off of the O2 molecule, the CO2, and then you basically rebreathe your breath, and you can stay underwater for like 4 hours.
Wow.
But usually the most you ever stay under is like an hour and a half. So
yeah.
the idea is like you're beyond the horizon. You are on like a small boat. You have it's called a drager on. You splash, and then you swim mile and a half underwater. Then you get to like basically waist deep water, and it's you and 12 other guys. You get to waist deep water, and then you kind of come up out of the water at the same time. And then you move onto the base, onto the land, and then you go do whatever your mission is for the day. So there's Special Forces has that capability. So that was the team that was the kind of team that I was in charge of for about 2 years.
Wow. So it's more mature, more elite people that can then accomplish more complex missions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just like problem solver, really, like jack of all trades, masters of none. So like the way it's broken down is like you've got your communications guys, 18 Echoes, who can do anything with a radio and a computer. They spend 14 weeks learning how to do everything you need to know with any type of radio.
Yeah.
Reaching up to satellites, bouncing radio traffic off the atmosphere. Then you've got your 18 Deltas, which are basically like EMTs who can do minor surgery. So they can do everything from, fix a gunshot wound to deliver a baby to pull teeth. Then you've got your 18 Charlies, which are your engineers. So they can build buildings, they can wire electricity, they can run plumbing, and then they also know how to blow all that stuff up.
Yeah.
And then your 18 Bravos are just like, you can hand them any gun in the world and they can take it apart, put it back together, zero it, make sure it shoots straight, all those things. And then there's the 18 Alpha, which is, the captain. And then we've got like an intel guy. But yeah, it's just guys who are, it's very selective.
Yeah.
Very few people make it through the training course. It's kind of designed that way so that, the end product is just a very mature, resilient guy who can think outside the box.
Yeah.
And it's just, absolutely, dedicated like that mission. He's not gonna quit. He's gonna get the job done.
Yeah. What was your position on that?
So I was the commander. I was the guy in charge.
Okay. So you're in charge of each of those specialists.
Yeah, I was in charge of the team.
I see.
So it was me. So
you would never be an 18 Charlie
no.
So your Special Forces equals the leader of all those guys you just
the 18 Alpha is the captain. So I'm in charge.
I see. Okay,
so
you're the 18 Alpha. Okay.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, so there's also the senior Green Beret enlisted guy who was previously an 18 Charlie, Delta or Echo, whatever. He's the team sergeant. So he's kind of like the heartbeat of the team.
Yeah.
He's been on that team for a bunch of years. So he's the guy who I kind of talk to. Hey, this is what our mission is, and he's the guy who says, okay, this is the training we need to do. And captains rotate every 2 years. The team sergeants stay around for 3 or 4 or 5 years, so they have much more longevity there. So
I see.
That the captain is in charge, but the reality of it is they're just kind of passing through.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of and I was phenomenally lucky. I had an absolutely unbelievable team, just unbelievable professionals, guys who, mission first, like got it done. There were so many times when I was in charge of that team where I felt guilty because I felt like I wasn't doing enough, but it's because I had guys who just knew what to do, didn't sit around and wait for direction, like they just got shit done.
And you were with them for how many?
Just about 2 years.
2 years.
Is the typical timeline for an officer to be on a team.
Yeah. And you keep in touch with those people?
Yeah, I do. I was just texting with a buddy of mine the other day, a guy from my team. So yeah, we keep in touch. It's probably not as much as maybe I'd like to, but kind of life happens and gets in the way.
Are they all still? Are they out or in or what? Mixed?
Yeah, kind of mixed.
Yeah.
One of my guys, one of my Deltas got out. He's in medical school at the University of Virginia right now. Another guy retired because he'd done 20 years. One guy got out. He was working here in Nashville. Everyone's life just kind of takes them in different directions. So
yeah. And now that you're a few years out, what stands out I mean, the transition must be trippy in itself. But like when you look back on being in Afghanistan in a combat mission, managing a team of experts, for months at a time, knowing that you're in a precarious situation. But I guess you also weren't really acknowledging that it could be you, as you said.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, what stands out about that experience to you today?
I think, the biggest thing kind of this past year and a half, like 2020 being what it is, like, my capacity for like really feeling like emotions, like the broad spectrum of emotions, like, I mean, I just don't have it as a 36-year-old. It is like, I'm very quick to like get angry.
Yeah.
And I think I'm, just like simple stuff, like just being just joyful.
Yeah.
It's probably harder for me than it should be, because I think that you spend so much time just kind of like swallowing your emotions. And like, example, you're in Afghanistan, like yeah, it's fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'm the dude in charge. I've got 18, 19-year-old kids. Like, they don't need to see the dude who's in charge, like, panicking or upset.
Yeah.
Because they're looking at me like, hey, sir, like, fucking, we got to get out of here. We need you to do this or that. So, I think that, like, spend so much time just kind of suppressing emotions and not feeling feelings that, like, that's been the biggest, like, kind of hangover from my Army career. And, the transition piece is, like, it's easy to go from one job to the next. You kind of lose, like, your friends and kind of the familiarity of the routine. Like, what do you wear to work every day? Or what do you wear to school every day? I mean, like, that stuff's kind of foreign for a little while. It's different.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing that I just realized is that, like, man, you just spend so much time, like, just putting your head down and keeping going.
Yeah.
You don't stop to look around and be like, oh man, like, hey, this isn't working very well, or like, I should be happier about this, or, I shouldn't be flipping out for stupid reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you train yourself to suppress emotions, or to favor certain emotions that help you get through what you're training for, which was a life or death situation.
Yeah.
So that you can't just be a person like the rest of us get to be, that can have a relatively easy experience of going through life and being happy, or expressing concern, or lack of confidence, or whatever all of us have the privilege of being able to express. You kind of learn to not do that because you're in charge of people who are looking to you to protect their lives.
Yeah.
And then you get into the real world, and you've trained yourself to do that since West Point, it sounds like.
Yeah. And it's not, I mean, it's again, just maybe it's a factor of like how we grew up as kids in Hingham or something like that. I mean, I love my parents in a lot of ways, but it's not like there's a whole range of emotions in the Hayes household.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not harping on them or anything. But I remember, so like, the first guy I really knew well, got killed in Afghanistan, this guy Eric Shaw. He deployed late because his wife had just had their third kid. So he deployed 2 weeks after the rest of the battalion. And, he had been in Afghanistan for like 10 days, 2 weeks when he got killed. And again, I knew this guy. He had been in my platoon for a couple months. Great guy. Freaking loved him. And at his memorial, I remember, like, there was guys crying, and like, I was like, felt bad, but it was like, I remember kind of thinking like, man, should I be more upset about this?
Wow.
It was also like, hey, we got stuff we got to do. And then same thing, like towards the end of deployment, my whole platoon got pretty banged up. 3 of my guys ended up getting killed, and a couple other guys I knew really well. And so we had this big memorial at the end. Split these 6 guys who gotten killed. And again, I knew 5 of them really well. I mean, again, 3 of them had been in my platoon. And I'd been with them every day for a year, 15 months. And I remember sitting there just being like, like I should be crying, like I should be more upset.
Wow.
But I wasn't. It's just like, all right, like, hey, we got shit to do.
Yeah.
Didn't think about it as much till later. But then I'm lucky, that I've had kind of this time to kind of reflect and, just doing a lot of self-discovery. But like that whole thing in terms of transition, like that's been the hardest thing for me to kind of overcome coming out of the Army is like, just the range of emotions is just not really there.
Yeah. And your life in the Army kind of rewarded that, but now this in a civilian life, it's not asking you to suppress your emotions.
Yeah, and it's not like I think it's more of it's not necessarily civilian life, it's just my interpersonal relationships, just, again, conversing with my kids, with Andy and stuff like that. But yeah, the Army definitely, the Army doesn't have, the Army is the big green machine.
Yeah.
And this was my experience when I was in the Army, but there was no time for your emotions or how you felt about stuff, they kind of want you to check the block, and talk to folks and stuff like that, but it was never like a real thing.
Yeah. Right.
So.
And then how about the public perception? Being a veteran, certain people. This is a generalization, but certain people react to veterans with, without question, without any hesitance. They react with praise and gratitude and thank you, and then there's other folks who maybe don't act that way, or who are even against you as a symbol of something. What's been your experience publicly as a veteran? Do you have any thoughts on that at all? Or has it been?
Like the thank you for your service thing is always very awkward to me. I've always been very uncomfortable with people saying that. I always make the joke back, like, "Oh, thanks for your tax dollars," because it's a fun way to make a living for a couple of years.
Yeah. What about that is weird to you? The thank you for your service, because I guess that's a very routine thing for people to automatically say.
Yeah, it's just like, I wasn't doing it for you. Don't thank me. Like, I was like, hey, this is kind of what I want to do with my life, so I signed up for it. I mean, I made the conscious choice. I didn't do it with any expectations of anything in return. So that makes it weird. I think that, people are generally trying to be nice. I think it's also they feel like there's an obligation there, like they feel like they have to say something like that.
Yeah.
This is kind of how society deems it, and I'm sure there's a lot of veterans who do appreciate that.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm skewed, but I do feel like people who have, in the broad Army, there's like so few people who actually have like real combat experience.
Yeah.
And I think that, and again, I'm casting a wide net here and speaking for a lot of other people based on my experience, but I don't think a lot of people who have that real combat experience, they want to hear that.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, whatever. And then, people who see the military as something negative or whatever, like, that's cool too. I mean, whatever blows your hair back.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the great thing about being here in this country. You can do whatever you want, think whatever you want.
Yeah.
I've definitely kind of in that vein, my thoughts on like what the, I kind of just think people would have a much different understanding of our military if like, if we kept everyone at home until we needed to go do something.
Yeah.
And then the reality of it is like, looking back on it, like we had the 101st Airborne Division, like big regular conventional Army guys like me, like, again, this is Reed's opinion obviously, but we had no business doing what we were doing in Afghanistan. Nothing changed there.
Yeah.
You know, we killed a lot of people. Some of our guys got killed. Like, that place didn't change one iota, really, in any significant fashion.
Wow.
You know, for the years we spent there. You know, there's a lot of restrictions placed on it. There's a lot of rules and regulations. So I look back on it now as I guess a more mature 36-year-old, but it's kind of those ideas like, you know, keep the 101st and all those other guys at home, you know, until like national survival's at stake.
Yeah.
And then, you know, say if the big one happens, like, all right, boys, go do what you got to do. No questions asked, you know.
Right.
So maybe people have a different perception if they wouldn't have a negative perception of soldiers if they weren't used as like policy, you know, political policy instruments.
Yeah.
In ways that I guess maybe I don't think are necessary.
Yeah. So geopolitical policy symbols, we just place people around the world as a representation of power, and that puts people at risk, maybe unnecessarily, and it also makes us look like, you know, maybe, you know, world bullies or world police or whatever.
I mean, I don't even know if it's as much as that. It's just like, you look, and again, I've got an insider's perspective of it, but like, you know, we didn't really accomplish very much when we were there at the 101st. Like, I believe very much in what we did, you know, when I was a Green Beret, you know, sending 12 guys to go work with 100, 200, 300, you know, people from that country, you know, Arabs from country X, and say, hey, this is how to take care of your own problem.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, I'd do that all day. I think that's exactly what SEALs and Green Berets and, you know, any of those special operations guys are exactly there for.
Yeah.
But a 19-year-old kid in Afghanistan,
I see.
He's not going to change anything.
Yeah. Okay. That's an important distinction, I think, for the tape. So it's specific small teams of special ops that can go train the locals for how to handle a problem versus sending in 100,000 troops to hang out in Afghanistan for 2 decades.
Yeah. I mean, you have the surgical capability of like, hey, if somebody there and there are that absolutely needs to die, like, that's what SEALs, Green Berets, a lot of these guys, this is what they do.
Yeah.
Or they train and, you know, work with the locals to solve their own problems. But, you know, that's a surgical capability.
Right.
The 101st is, you know, it's a fucking sledgehammer.
Yeah.
You know.
And that's what happens when you graduate. At the lowest end of the totem pole, you're in the 101st. Like, if I just went and signed up for the Army tomorrow, they would put me in that.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
You want to say, hey, I want to be an infantry guy. I want to be
Yeah.
a 11 Bravo, an infantry soldier.
Yeah.
That's one of the big units you go to.
Got it.
And, you know, it's 18, 19-year-old kids who are escaping, you know, again, this is a broad generalization, but usually a pretty poor situation at home.
Yeah.
Pretty poor economic outlook, pretty poor financial outlook. So it's like, hey, here's an opportunity to get out of this podunk town. Here's make a little money, go see the world, get some benefits along the way. Like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense for those guys, but then you send them somewhere and it's like, you're trying to explain the difference between tribal cultures to some 19-year-old kid from Eufaula, Alabama, and he's sitting there while he's smoking his 10th Marlboro of the day and drinking a Monster, and he's like, sir, I just want to kill something.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, all right, man, like.
Yeah.
So.
That's it. And then when you're special forces, you're are you getting debriefed? Maybe this is irrelevant, but I'm genuinely interested. Like, are you getting debriefed, educated along the way about like the broader story of what's happening?
Yeah.
Politically and militaristically, like, do you have an understanding of what you're fighting for and against? Yeah,
I mean, so that's the thing about there's 5 active duty special forces group, and they're all regionally aligned.
Yeah.
So like 5th group is the Middle East, 7th group is South America, 1st group is like Southeast Asia. So like our focus when I was a Green Beret was the Middle East.
Yeah.
So like I knew what was going on in all those countries, and I knew about a few months ahead of time, I was going to Jordan. This was kind of what our mission was going to be. So it's like understanding the tribal culture, understanding, the American policy there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, we like the Jordanians because they're like kind of covertly friends with the Israelis, but they also can't lose face to the Saudis and the Iraqis. So they kind of got to be tough guys there. So and then just like the reason why Abdullah's the king is because he's got the backing of all these different tribes, which are super important. So it's just like you've got to understand all this nuance because, if I'm sitting there and I'm talking to, an Arab leader of this tribe, like I got to remember, like, oh shit, like his dad didn't support, Abdullah's brother when he was trying to be the king or something like that. So it's just stuff like that.
Is somebody teaching you that though, or is it on you to go learn that?
I mean, it's a combination of being taught and learning that. It's also, the resources are there.
Yeah.
But that's also part of the expectation.
Yeah. Is that you're kind of studying the nuances of the culture in which you're deployed.
Right.
And expected to make a difference.
Yeah.
By influencing the local leaders, basically.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. And if you don't know your stuff, then you're not going to be taken seriously. You're not going to be effective.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, like, I show up as a Green Beret and like I'm in Jordan, I'm speaking Arabic and I can converse in Arabic with somebody and I know the history of the region. And I know that this guy doesn't like that guy because he took a dump in his tent at, that's a joke, but
he'll start a war.
Yeah, he'll kill his best camel or something,
Yeah. So you were overseas the whole time under Obama? Or Bush before that?
Yeah, no, President Obama was, almost my entire military career was under President Obama.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. And then when you got out, by the time you got out, did you have children while you were in the Army?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one of the things we did. So I met Annie, my wife, in 2009 when I was like fresh out of Ranger School.
Yeah.
Started dating, left for Afghanistan. We had talked about getting married. Then, guys were getting killed when I was in Afghanistan, and what would happen is if somebody got killed, they would kind of stop all communications from the base in Afghanistan so that the family member didn't find out inadvertently. They didn't want, like, somebody saying, like, calling you up and saying, hey, I'm so sorry that, Dustin got killed when the Army hadn't notified you yet. And then you'd be like, well, what the fuck?
Right.
Yeah. So Annie and I had been talking about getting married. Then everything started happening, and then, I guess now I'm thinking about it, there was some part of me that was worried that I would get killed. I wanted to make sure that Annie was like entitled to my life insurance benefits.
Yeah.
So I came home. They used to give you these 2 weeks of R&R in the middle of it. So I was like the very last guy to take R&R. So 9 months into my deployment, came home for 2 weeks. Me and Annie got married at the Montgomery County Courthouse. Then I went back to Afghanistan for like 2.5 months. Came back from that deployment, and about a year and a half later, we had our first daughter, Hadley, in September of 2013. So we had her when I was in the middle of the Special Forces course. And then right before I was about to graduate, we got pregnant with our second daughter, Vivian, and she was born in January of 2015. And then a month after that, I left. I went down to Key West for like 6 weeks for the dive school.
Wow.
And then came home for about a month and a half. Left for about 4.5 months. Yeah. 4.5, 5 months. No, I'm sorry. I came home from dive school, spent about 2 or 3 months at home, left 4.5 months, came back. Then we got pregnant with my son, Everett. I deployed again for about 4 months, and then came back from that last deployment. And Annie kind of said, like, I can't do this anymore. This is not the life. I don't want to be home with 3 kids by myself trying to do all this, managing this house. And to her credit, I mean, Annie was finishing up her degree, took her last final on a Friday. Her school was an hour away, and then she had our son Everett on Sunday.
Wow.
2 days later, yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so I had 3 kids all while I was in the Army.
Yeah, and then you transitioned and went to business school, and then now you're working. You're you're pretty nonchalant about what you've done, but maybe I'm just projecting. But what is it like now? How do you look back on it all now, being in the civilian life? And hasn't been that long, I guess, since your time in the military, but it seems like such a stark difference of realities to me.
Yeah, it's definitely like, I was fortunate to have the 2 years in business school, which was kind of great because I spent the previous 3 years deployed, gone all the time for training. So it was really cool because business school, at least at Vanderbilt, was like, I had like 3 hours of class a day, Monday through Thursday, and then I was off, and then once I figured out that grades didn't matter at business school, then I just, not that I didn't give a shit, but I wasn't trying to be the valedictorian.
Yeah.
Actually, I knew I was going to be the valedictorian after like the second day, so I was just trying to graduate.
Yeah.
Well, I knew I was going to graduate, but I tried to spend the most amount of time I could at home.
Yeah.
And we had a great 2 years. But looking back on it, I think, there's some days where I'm very much like, I'm so grateful that every goal that I set for myself in the Army when I was like 16, I accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that I didn't do that I had wanted to do. But there's very much like, I came in, I had all those goals as like a 16-year-old kid, and I never stopped to reevaluate what those goals would mean to a guy who was married, a guy who had 1 kid, a guy who had 2 kids, and then somebody who had 3 kids. So yeah, there's some days where I look back on it and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I did all that, because I checked out for every block. But then that's, me being like not selfish, but like thinking only about the things that I wanted.
Yeah.
Whereas like, Annie didn't want me to do special forces, and I kind of just, said whatever. I completely disregarded her feelings, and I still feel very badly about that.
Yeah.
And then, just I had a perception of what it was going to be like when I was a Green Beret. That I was going to be home more, and I was going to have a better experience when it was not. I was gone all the time, and that was definitely very hard. So like, would I go back now and change it and do it differently? Probably, because I think my relationship, my marriage with everyone would be better because I would have not spent so much time just kind of neglecting Annie's feelings or the kids' feelings or anything like that, just because I was wanting to do what I wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, it's regret mixed with self-satisfaction a lot of times.
Sure, yeah.
So again, it's like you think about it, like I can't go back and change any decisions I made. But that's definitely like something I think I thought a lot about.
Yeah. Well, you're still young. You got a long life ahead of you with your kids and with your family, and
yeah. That's what you say. I mean, you say that, and I tell myself that, but then like you've got to stop and think about like, am I just doing the same thing I've always done? Where like I'll just keep my head down and keep going,
Yeah.
And like it's, if I could just do this, then
right.
This is very much like get out of that mindset.
Yeah.
Now I fall victim to the fact that, hey, we had our kids who are so young, when Everett goes to college, I'm going to be 49 and Annie will be 45, and then we can do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, man, that's 13 years from now.
Right.
Why am I even thinking about that?
Yeah.
But that's just sort of the mentality I'm trying to deprogram myself.
Yeah, delaying gratification or putting off putting off your happiness or your contentedness to the future, and just putting your head down, because there's obviously benefit, and it's an admirable trait to be able to commit to something and to sort of hustle or wrestle your way through it no matter what. That's how big things get accomplished.
Right.
But as Ferris Bueller says, if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. There's a lot to be said about not being blinded by your ambition, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Because life's going by whether you like it or not.
Right.
And if you're attentive to the moment or to the day or to the people around you and to your own experience and your own thoughts on that experience, even if they're at odds with what you thought your thoughts would be about things as they happen, then in theory you can live more fully and directly and attentively.
Yeah.
Because that side of things is important too. And to balance both of those, you could probably have a nice life for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, like, if I'm not really paying attention, it's very easy for me to slip back into, like, old habits where, like, I've got to do this, and this, like.
Yeah.
So, it's just reflecting as a 36-year-old.
Yeah. No, it's important, man. Do you feel like you're, do you work on the emotional side of it in any way? Or how do you go about that?
I try to.
Yeah.
Like, I see a counselor and try to talk about, like, feeling those feelings.
Yeah.
I try to be more present about things. And it's definitely, like, being more communicative about, like, the stuff, like, if I'm worn out, I think it's just normal. Like, when I'm worn out and tired, like, I get fucking snappy and crabby. I think it's a normal human thing.
Yeah.
But, like, it's more so, like, I've got to be better about understanding, like, just my own limitations and just being like, hey, like, whatever I'm doing, like, yeah, I'm getting, like, worn out. And, like, I need to, if it's something stupid, like, I'm getting tired of doing something stupid.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck, why am I doing this? If I'm going to be tired the rest of the day and shitty to my wife and my kids, like, do I really need to be doing this? Like, no.
Right.
But I don't always do a good job of kind of, like, just stopping and checking in with myself.
Yeah.
Which, again, I'm working on, but.
Yeah. Well, it is work. I mean, it's easy to go on autopilot.
Absolutely.
For anybody. And, and especially with however many years of training that taught you to complete the mission and check boxes, and that's what you have to do to survive.
Yeah.
Then I can only imagine how hard it is to try to break that. But, well, Reed Hayes, you've always been an older brother to me, my second older brother.
Well.
But I'm glad that we got at least started scratching the surface of a lot of things we'd never talked about, because I hadn't really hung with you since you were just graduating from West Point, I guess.
Yeah.
And then point being, it's great to see you and to hear you out, and I appreciate your willingness to do this at late-ish at night and weeknight with kids and all that.
Yeah.
But I hope you felt like you got a chance to say whatever you wanted to say, and if you didn't, please go for it.
Yeah, no, I sit here just wondering how much rambling I did. I wonder if any of it's going to make any sense.
We'll see.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily very cogent, but yeah, it's fun, man. Hopefully it's fruitful.
Yeah, I think so. I always think people that know you and love you will like it, if nothing else, and that's not a small thing. So
yeah.
Thanks for doing it. Thanks for letting me stay. Thanks for the pizza and the bourbon.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. You are pleased to come back and anytime, and I would like to apologize one final time for that one time I tricked you into walking into dog shit by Haleyfield.
Yeah.
That was cool.
I forgive you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Been carrying that burden for years.
Yeah.
That's it. That was Reed Hayes, Green Beret. Reed Hayes, thanks, Reed, for sharing your story. Thanks all for listening. Catch you next time on the Jalapeno Podcast. This is Ty, your host. Happy Independence Day.